Hey guys, it's Dreamforce here. You know they say that every time you pick Hanzo in ranked, God kills a kitten? Well, this is Thorin's channel. And every time you pick Hanzo in ranked, Thorin kills a seagull.
When you actually started in the Overwatch League in 2018, this first year, as I've said, you did do the years before. It's not like you came into it totally fresh like some people. But I remember one of the coolest things was when people saw this game, the most famous complaint is it's a really hard game to view and spectate and obviously to commentate. And so I always thought the coolest thing was it's almost like, mate, like a fucking one of those movies. It's like you've assembled this super team of casters from all the different games. You've made this game, which, as you say, is sort of a crazy mashup of like MOBA with TF2, with fucking like CS, with Quake, with it's everything. Because it's got like the Quake rocket launcher with like a sniper rifle from CS. Like it is just the craziest mashup ever. And so I remember thinking, well, hey, we're going to see now, because I know these casters are all amazing, but they're all coming from different perspectives. So who's going to get a grip on it? Like I can tell you, like my mate Semler, he'll tell you openly, he had a hard time with it, mate. Remember, he's doing a high-paced game too, but he struggled with the MOBA elements and the comps and things like that we didn't have in CS, right? I have to say, mate, I listened to all the casters the first year. Look, I thought Monty was the best caster as like an analyst, as like a brain, you know. But actually, as a role player, you were the best caster, mate. You nailed it the first year. What was your grasp on the game? What do you think you hooked into? What was your secret?
Yeah, I think what I found out early was that there's a lot of things off the screen that were interesting I could talk about, but as soon as I tell you like, oh, there was something happened over here, right? Like you didn't really see it, so you don't really kind of like grasp it. So like what I started to focus in on doing was, okay, what is the biggest moment that we just saw? Even if I know that there's a bigger play that happened on the side or whatnot, what's the biggest thing that we just saw like on the screen that's going out to fans that we can latch onto, that I can create like a point in time that we can like reference and kind of circle back to, right? And I think Overwatch, because there's so many different things going on, it's like, okay, is the biggest, easiest ability to kind of see and latch onto and kind of, work off of that. Because we had a, Call of Duty that actually provided like a really awesome kind of, like a talent coach who he had directed like Super Bowls and done like Olympics and stuff. And, it was something that he kind of like drilled into our mind was obviously talk about what's on the screen. And then the other kind of like golden rule is like, as soon as you kind of get over somebody's head at home or, make them feel like they're a little bit dumb or whatnot, they tune out, right?
Right.
So the easiest way to kind of keep the audience hooked and keep them focused is to kind of tell them what they saw and like make them feel good about like, oh, I did see that. Yeah, like, he's kind of right. Where sometimes it was a little bit painful because you're giving up on so many cool and analytical moments that like happen on the other side, right? But I also felt that like that's something that like, hey, me and Monty do a show and like that's a breakdown we can do on that, right? Like
I see what you mean. That's a good way of thinking of it. Yeah.
There's a spot for like that type of content, and maybe that content lives outside of the actual.
By the way,
cast.
that's even, I would say, a secret of casting that a lot of people don't maybe figure out early on is, as you say, people have to learn sort of like the analysts will get that. I don't have to sort of do it right now in the moment, in the middle of the action. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point.
Like, let me break down the simplest thing and also set like Mitch up for success, because a lot of it, like Overwatch is like hype. So working with Mitch, I was like, look, I don't really want you to change anything you do, because like you're like, you're at the top of your game in terms of like, energy. I was like, let me figure out how I fit into that. And a lot of it was, hey, this just happened because this happened. This is what you're going to see coming next. Because I think that was the other thing with Overwatch is like, if you're not prepped about what you're about to see, you're just going to get hit with like, colors everywhere and things moving around. Like if you don't have any concept of like, okay, I'm probably going to see this happen. Like it's like you're getting hit by a car crash like every 25 seconds. So a lot of like the focus and I don't think you kind of get the like, oh, like when people kind of think of my analysis, it's a little bit more dumbed down than others, but I think that's also okay, because I think that's like what makes the cast like listenable and accessible for the most amount of people. Because like we ended up doing a lot of the Disney games because it was like, yeah, we're not going to go, we're gonna hit this kind of sweet spot of like we give the hardcore enough, but we're also like fun for casuals. And I think there's, you know, other avenues to do like that super hardcore analytical stuff. Monty was really good at doing it in like a really like condensed like short window, like hitting all of those points really fast, you know, getting back out to Doha. Where I kind of looked at it like, okay, I'm gonna have to change, like, you know, I'm analysis, but I'm also sometimes like almost like a secondary play-by-play guy, you know, in a way where like sometimes I'm gonna have to call a fight because like I'm talking about.
You can't pause and then throw to him, can you? Yeah, you have to just do it yourself if it happens, right?
Erupts where, I actually think casting Overwatch. No, obviously, no, not casting really anything, you know, after that, but like I think it's made me just a better talent. Like you're surrounded by like really great talent, you know, early on and all throughout the league, right? And you just kind of like pick up little things from everybody. But then also kind of ditching the like, okay, I don't have to be, you know, the analyst in the room who on Reddit gets all the love. Like, because, you know, you think about it, a Reddit thread has 300 comments and there's like 50,000 people watching the stream, right? So like, who really, I think that was the one thing. It's like, who really is the majority of these people? And trying to figure out like, what's the show those people want?
I hope everyone listening to this, if you're broadcasting that, you listen, he actually just gave you like an insane epiphany there, which is if 100 people say they don't like it on Reddit, but the cast is 70,000 people, they're probably fucking a drop in the bucket. Probably everyone's having a great time. Like, you don't let it skew you too far, you know?
No. And I think too, people...
Because you know this, dude, in those green rooms, people get tortured by Reddit threads. They're getting manipulated left and right by what they think people want or what people are getting criticized for, right?
And you can't be liked by everybody. Like that's just kind of like the nature of it, right? Like in like when I look at different shows and you know like how I kind of like work now, I'm like, okay, like you know, I know some casters on our team are like really like great for that Reddit crowd. I know some are really great for like the hardcore analysis crowd, right? And then like I'm okay being the person who's just kind of like okay for maybe the people who are just like there to have a good time. Like they want some analysis, but they also want some jokes. They want some banter. And it's like, you know, if everybody's trying to take the same lane on the show, you're just going to keep, you know, every cast is going to sound the same, right? That's what I thought like was awesome about season, you know, one, really assembling all those talents. And I think actually we've done a good job kind of maintaining that is like everybody had their own different feel, right? Like some people liked us, and some people didn't like others. Some people didn't like us, but then liked others. And like, that's awesome that, you know, some people are like, hey, you know, Wolf and Achilleos are my favorite. Semler and Hex are my favorite. You know, Monty and Doa are my favorite. And like, I think that's pretty healthy that like, you know, hey, there's a duo here that's, you know, for me. And like, I really get excited for those games. And I think everybody like just makes a really good product where like, nobody's like, oh man, I think they're like, you know, unlistenable, like take it off. Right. Like, you know, but just like, hey, I'm not, you know, me wearing sweatshirts and making jokes and doing stuff like isn't for everybody. And like, that's okay. Cause there's a lot of people it is for. And I think, I think like how you mentioned, like, I think broadcast talent need to kind of get comfortable with that. Of like, you know, you're not going to be able to please everybody. Like, and then also like, look at the roster on your show. And it's like, okay, what can I do to just like complete the roster and make the show better?
Yes.
You know, I knew my role with Overwatch like early on was like I'm the super generalist Call of Duty guy. Like that's kind of like my thing. Like I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna have fun, and I'm gonna speak to that audience. And let me just get really good at that because like Monty's really good at like I'm not gonna speak to the League of Legends audience and the hardcore analysts better than him. So like let him dominate that.
No, the point you're also making,
my thing.
I feel like some people, look, we are obviously, if we all work an event, we're all on day rates like the old circuit. We are in a sense competitors. We're literally competing for the same job. Yeah. But I know what you mean. I always feel like too many people think they're battling the other caster. But like you say, if it's a good broadcast, I think of it like WWE, mate. Maybe you're the heel and I'm the babyface and he's the jobber. But at the end of the day, we want the whole show to go over and all the crowd to have a great time, right?
Yeah. Ultimately, like, you know, if the show is the same show and with the same viewers and, you know, whatnot, like, sure, maybe you get paid a little bit more, but if everybody works to make the show awesome and the show grows and the show gets better, then like everybody does better, right? Which I think like sometimes I think it's more like the analyst role. I feel like sometimes where like, you know, it's kind of like can be competitive of like,
it's like you said, people want to one up and they want the Reddit clip that goes, you want a genius, you explain this, but like that can come at the expense of the show, right?
Yeah, or like there's sometimes where like, you know, you talk about wrestling, like you kind of put people over, right? Where it's like, hey, Sideshow made a great point. Let me remind people that like Sideshow made this point, and like that adds credibility to Sideshow, right? And then, you know, maybe it happens with.
By the way, if you're a commentator, I can tell you, desk analysts will fucking love you if you reference a point they said on the desk before the game in the cast. They will love you. I'm telling you, they will love you.
And it's super simple to do to kind of like put those people over, because the more credible they are, the more, you know, credible the show is, right? So I think like like how you mentioned, I think like broadcasts can get pretty competitive, but like also, you know, you don't get paid more to cast the last match, right? You don't get like, you know, it's not like you're like, oh man, because you do the finals, you do this, right? You know, the first year, like we knew we weren't going to do the finals and whatnot. Like that's totally fine. Like, you know, Monty and Doa like were there way before us. They had helped build the thing. Like it's their moment, right? And like, hey, you know, let's do the semis. Let's do an awesome job. Let's do the desk. Let's do whatever. Like, let's just make the moment big. And I mean, it's kind of like what I was saying earlier. Like, look, you fit in the right way. You do the right things. Like, eventually, things are gonna kind of go your way, right? I mean, I always kind of joke with like, you know, when people are like, well, how do you be like a successful talent? It's like you pretty much just need to like show up time and be good to work with, and be a good teammate, and like.
It's all the boring shit no one wants to do. Like you said, just be reliable, be a cool guy, don't be a dick. But everyone wants to believe it's like, no, be the greatest, I'm the most knowledgeable. You're right. You've nailed it. It's the basics, right? Just do the basics.
It's literally the basics. It's like, hey, you know what? Like, if we need somebody to fill in on the desk, like jump in on the desk, like do that, right? Like, you know, do a great job with the cast. But you know, if you're there in the first place, you know you're doing a good job with the cast, right? So it's like. Yeah, it's like all the little simple things that I think like make the difference, and especially on a show like that where you're working with the same people like 70 days a year, 80 days a year. I'm sure you see it on like, you know, with Counter-Strike, like you work with those people so much, like you need to kind of like have good, you know, the vibes in the room. Definitely go on to the camera, and it's like you need to make sure like everybody's on the same page, like everybody's, you know, feeling good about it, right? Because you know, things go sideways pretty quick, right?
Like, man, I've done those events where, you know, you have a big blow up with someone, and then just as you're in the middle of the fight, the person goes, you have to go on the desk now, guys. And you have to just go and look and smile and just say to that guy, yeah, great point you just made about it. But you're just thinking, fuck you, you know, that can happen easily, for sure. And like you say, it will bleed a little bit into the show, no matter how pro you are. Yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing that I think would have been cool is like if we would have been able to do like more. You know, we all had like static pairs, and I think that's obviously great. It would have been cool to see some crazier days of like, you know,
mix up the combos. Right, okay.
Just to like spice things up a little bit. I always think that stuff's like fun. Like I think you kind of keep those like sacred pairs for like big moments, right?
Yes.
Like, because you know, sometimes I actually looked. Me and Mitch casted 25% of all of the Overwatch League matches ever. It's like
it's pretty wild.
It's like a wild stat, but also it's like, you know, you still want to make those casts feel special, right? Where it's you know, the same kind of argument where like, you know, Envy versus like FaZe, right? Or, you know, Envy doesn't exist anymore, but like OpTic versus FaZe, right? Like you see that match 30 times in a year, it's not that special anymore. But like if it's like, you know, 5 times a year, 10 times a year, right? Where like there's an argument to be made like, okay, you know, this is like a great pairing. Like let's use them for, you know, big tournaments, playoffs, whatnot, right? And then kind of like, you know, mix it around a little bit. But somehow we've been able to keep it fresh, I think. And I think it's been also an adjustment. Like this is going to probably, you know, this would probably make a lot of talent not angry, but I know how like some of my peers are. I've even looked at like co-streaming as like, how do I kind of adopt like more of a React co-stream style into, because like,
listen, there's obviously something to it. There's a reason they're getting all those views, right? Someone finds that appealing. Yeah.
It's blowing up. People like to watch it that style. People want to watch it that way. People want to hear it discussed that way. So it's like, how do I, maybe there's a fight that doesn't really change the way or landscape of the game, and like, how do we just have fun and just have a crazy react for 25 30 seconds and some kind of like fun banter about it,
right?
And like, because you kind of see, like, I mean, look at like the VALORANT numbers for co-streaming, like League of Legends numbers for co-streaming, like they're through the roof, right? Sometimes even beating the main broadcast. So clearly there's something that like fans and audiences want, like from that product. And it's like, okay, well, how do you kind of think about like working that into, a main show? Like, I think that'll be something that like esports will probably need to even look at as we move into the future of like, hey, you know what, like for a CS event, like let's say it's early groups or something, right? Can you just do like, you, Machine, and like 2 other people on a couch and just watch the game together, right?
Yes.
Like,
I know what you mean, because at the moment, the real problem we have is it just tends to be how important it is based on the tournament. So it's like, if it was a small tournament, you're right, maybe they'd do that. But you're right, what you should actually do is sometimes at a big event, there's a meaningless throwaway group stage game that, like you say, if you actually do it like it's the FAL, it probably won't be as good. It'll actually be too pro. It'll be too sort of high stakes casting, as it were. Whereas, if you made it fun, maybe that'd actually make it a unique one-off event, right?
You have people like screaming about this play in a match, and it's like, well, it's game like 3 out of like 28, and it's like, your energy level is like up here. It's like when we get to the end, where do you? There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go, right? So like maybe you kind of look at like, hey, like a GSL groups or something like that. Maybe it's covered in more of like a fun red zone like co-stream style, right? And like there's a little bit more looseness to it, like. Maybe there's a secondary stream that has a cast that is, hey, we're just going to have caster audio in the gameplay, right? For people who want that. But maybe the main stream is something a little bit more co-stream vibe. Like I
the joke here, by the way, is it's not just other talent. In theory, you're actually potentially arguing against your own specialty, right? So you actually kind of show you care more about the scene in general, right? Just being bigger and improving.
Yeah, I mean, there would still be stuff like, obviously you still need casters and talent for those shows. It's just like, maybe it's a little bit different, right? Like maybe it's me, Mitch, and Zoe on a couch, and we're just like watching 2 different games going at a time. And it's like, feels a little bit more variety, and you kind of break it up with different kind of fun games in between, right? And I think though, like you mentioned, like, hey, once you get to like quarters and semis and finals, it should probably be a traditional broadcast, right? Like, but maybe early on round 1, like, do we need all the, do we need to treat game 1 like we do game 20, game 16? Like, I think that's something that probably, especially with how good co-streaming is, like you probably just have to look at, and it's like, okay, like, can we Call of Duty did something really interesting last year, kind of went under the radar. They had a co-stream in the venue, and they used the co-stream on the main broadcast as like the interview.
Okay.
So like Zumo is in the venue, and Puckett on the desk would throw to the co-stream, and basically they would just bring the player over to the couch on the co-stream in the venue and like just talk about the game for like 5-10 minutes. And they like, that's what they used for the mainstream and the co-stream. So like some kind of like collaboration between co-streams and main broadcasts. And I was like, and the players were like, I mean, they were just opening it up like crazy, because they were like, oh, I'm on the co-stream, right? So they're like, kind of like cursing, having a good time, talking trash on other players. I was like, oh, this feels kind of like a, and then it went back to the actual produced desk in studio, and like they reacted to it, right? And like that kind of feels cool in a way of like trying to incorporate that more. So like that's something I've even been thinking about. How do you kind of incorporate that into the cast? Because clearly content that people want, right?
By the way, obviously we should talk about the fact that your duo partner was obviously Uber, and he himself basically came from similar background to you, comes from doing many different FPS. He did Counter-Strike, and he did fucking World Attacks. He was in the ESL salt mines doing all those crazy white label games for years, mate. So the joke is, even though I know to Overwatch fans, he was like a revelation. Like, who's this guy? I was like, mate, if you'd ever seen this guy, he's like one of the most obvious natural talents I've ever seen, mate. He's just unreal at every game. So the question I have is, who is this guy to you? And more importantly, how do you particularly, League? Because I know people consciously in duos think about these things. How do you fit together? Like, I'll give you an example. Back in the day in Counter-Strike, Anders and Semler really just did the most basic one. I do a round, you do a round.
Yeah.
They had a simple, I mean, you have rounds in fair to be Counter-Strike to do.
Yeah.
How did you guys figure it out, and who was this guy to you when you met him?
Oh, I mean, when I met him, I didn't really even know him, to be honest, because, like, you know, mostly focused in North America.
Sure.
It was during Overwatch World Cup, and we weren't casting together at the time. I was casting with ZP because I had casted with ZP in E-League, and he was casting with D-Man. D-Man was casting Overwatch, and there was a game during World Cup that it was like a group's tiebreaker. They needed to do some tiebreaker games or whatever, and I think somebody from Blizzard was like, "Oh, like we would love to see like you and Mitch like do something together." And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, why not? Like I'll just throw on the headset." And like, you know, after that, we were just like, "Hey, that was pretty decent." Like, you know, like that actually sounded pretty good. And like people like were like, "Oh my god, like that was awesome, whatnot. Like you guys should, you know, work together." And then starting to get to know him a little bit more. You know, he's from the same hometown as my wife in Australia, so like we kind of have like a little bit of a ties there. I'm the non-Australian of the group, but you know, for me, it was like, you know, he's so good at those like moments and play-by-play. I really kind of looked at it as like, okay, like I don't really want you to change just much of anything. If anything, I was like, hey, it's game 1. Maybe let's not like go to like, you know, level 12. Let's not shoot all our bullets, you know, really early on. Like, let's kind of save them for when it matters. And a lot of it was like, look, like you kind of do what you do, and then I'll figure out how to be the bridge in between, you know, the moments that you do, right? Because clearly the fans like loved what he does. I think like just fans of all games really kind of love what he does. But it doesn't really work if like the other person next to him is also as like energetic and high. Like there needs to be some balance there, because he gets very high. So it was like, okay, like how do I kind of like fit this kind of you know, void? And like basically I kind of thought of myself as like, okay, if he goes to 11, I need to figure out how to slowly get us from 11 down to like 5. So he can start at 5 and then kind of go ramp back up, right? At first, it was like we were going from 11, and then I would come in and it would go down to like 3 instantly. And then it was like, okay, I need to come in a bit, you know, louder, a bit more excited, and then kind of gradually bring us down. And then over time, I think it's been working about like how to make things more conversational. A lot of the times, it's like kind of like baby steps of play-by-play and, you know, color of like, play-by-play goes, asks analyst a question. Analyst asks answers question, goes back to play-by-play, right? And it was like, well, you know, how can I identify moments where like I can ask him a question, like he can just stop and we can just conversate, or how can I basically be like, hey, I don't think you need to do play-by-play this fight. We can just kind of talk over it, and adding more variety, which like I think the one thing that I'm proud of is that we've casted so many games together, but people still like it, because like that can be kind of hard. Like you hear the same thing 200-300 times, and then you're just like, I mean, it's just, you know, how people are, right? Like you hear the same song 300 times, you probably don't want to listen to it again. Sure. Like, so how do you kind of keep that fresh? I think one of the things that we've done better at is like when I look at the Overwatch League schedule, or, you know, whatever game, right? Hey, I know this game's not going to be awesome. Let's just have fun with this one. Like I think sometimes you need to cast to the quality of the game as opposed to just do the same thing all the time. If we know these two teams are bad, let's not pretend like this is a super important match and it's the biggest thing ever. And, you know, hey, let's find a player or two on each team that's a little bit interesting. Maybe they got some promise. Let's focus on them, what we like, what we don't like. You know, if it turns into an awesome match, great. We'll go that route. But like, let's not come in and at the start lie and be like, hey, you know, this is a match of the gladiators, right? And just kind of like lie to the people, because I think people know like, hey, this match is going to be not great. Like, let's just kind of like treat it as so. Because you also, you do 300 games or whatever it is, you can't do research for all 300.
Oh, it's
you know
impossible.
what I mean? Like,
yeah, of course.
no. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna, for these games, I typically like to watch like the 2 most recent matches of every team because that's like basically 2 weeks. Teams are not transforming the way they've looked.
The playbook's going to be similar, sure, exactly. Yes.
The way a team looked, a month ago is pretty much the same way they're going to look, today. Maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit worse. So it's like, okay, I'm going to go watch those games. I'm going to go find some players I like and they're interesting. But if it's like 2 top tier teams, it's like, okay, let's like, give this one the full on treatment. I think that's something that we've done really good at. That's like made our cast not feel the same, because I think it can get really easy to go out and do the same show every day, right?
By the way, as you say, you obviously did get, you're actually the people who did the whole Overwatch League. Apparently 25% is a pretty insane number of people know how many matches were played and etc. Right? Obviously, when, as you say, in season 1, it was like it was Avengers, fucking all the super team came together. And then it's like over the years, different people moved on. It might be to League again, might be to Valorant, might be whatever it might be to. And you were the only ones who sort of stayed the whole time. And now Overwatch League's over, so you did get to do the whole thing, right? Was there a moment when you kind of realized, because like you say, what's cool, I think, is that you even acknowledge it. You started out in season 1, obviously at the bottom of the rung of all those casters. Like the ones from League are huge, and the ones that are coming from games like CS are just considered more like esports royalty, So like you worked your way up, and eventually by the end, the joke is you will be remembered as the casting duo of the Overwatch League. Was there a moment you sort of realized that like it's kind of our game, like we've actually sort of got to the top?
I think like year like 2 or 3, it kind of became like, I think early on we knew we had something, like, you kind of like feel it. There's like a little bit of like upswell with like fans and whatnot. And I think by year 3 we kind of like felt like, oh, okay. Yeah. Cause like, it's kind of funny, right? You have the League of Legends guys, the CS guys, like, and it's the World of Tanks, the Australian World of Tanks guy who's living in Berlin, and the Call of Duty guy, right? Or like the two kind of.
That's why I always thought it was hilarious about Sideshow coming, because the joke is, a lot of people don't know this. Sideshow actually grew up something mad like 8 miles from where I lived in the UK. But the joke is he's from Team Fortress. I'd never heard of this fucking guy. I was like, I even told him, I didn't know there was Team Fortress esports. I thought it was just a game like 10 years ago. So the variety was insane of the people, right?
When I met him, I was like, I have no idea like who. I was like, he's like Team Fortress 2. I was like, did not even know there were events. Yes. Didn't know there were like, things going on for that. But like, yeah, I think season 3, it was like, because you start on this project and there's so many like awesome talent from all these other games, and you kind of like just like look up to them, you work with them, you kind of take feedback, and then like it just kind of happens really fast where you just look around, you're like, oh shit, like we're the old people.
Oh, you're the veteran, right?
Like,
okay.
Yeah, and you're like, oh man, like this is kind of like our responsibility now. And that was like the moment that I was like, oh, we kind of like, this is like our thing. And I think from then on out, it's been really like just refining it, like trying to come back each year and not sound the same, and trying to do different things and like having fun with it. And like one of the things I really liked about the early seasons, like, me and Monty don't have the same like ideas in terms of like how to broadcast stuff, but like I love those conversations, because like there's some stuff where I'm like, yeah, that is a pretty good point. We probably should do that, right? And like you kind of take like bits and pieces of the way that other people think, kind of like, and weave into the way that like you have these opinions on, right? Where with so much talent in the room, there's no way you can just be like, no, that's a bad idea, let's not do that. Like it's like, all right, like I'll fucking try anything once, like like, hey, let's do this segment, or let's do this, like whatever, like see how it goes, like. And then by that time you have it's actually one of the things I've loved about working at Blizzard, like internally, is that there's just so many smart people. Like I just love just listening to really smart people just like talk, and their opinions on how they like do things. And then it's like, okay, like that's how most great things are done. It's like, okay, I learned from a bunch of really smart people, and then I took all that stuff, and then I formed my own kind of thing around that, right? And that was like one of the sad moments, is like, obviously now, like, getting to kind of like take some of the learnings from early on, you know, and kind of like pass that down. But like, I just genuinely like love those like conversations and like the things that we had, like, you know, in the early seasons of like, you have all these people from different esports who have done things different way and different games. And it's like, how do you kind of mishmash all that together to make something that, and also for Overwatch, it's just a different fan base, right? So how do you take, you know, what, hey, this worked for CS and it works for their fans. And it's like, well, how do you like, you know, like take that with like a League of Legends spin and then put like a little bit of Overwatch on it, right? And how to make that work. Like, I mean, those are like, you know, that's like you work on a show and like, cool, the money's awesome, but like I think there's like a undefined like price or quantity on just learning things like that. Like, you know, those are conversations and doors and whatnot that like, you know, would have never opened, right? So I think I'll always look back on OWL like fondly, just because like, you know, you're able to work with so many awesome people, whether it's like, and when I started working internally, like you have people from like who've done like major stuff like the NBA and the NFL, and like you're like, okay, I just want to sit around and like in meetings and just like listen to how you guys solve these problems and think about this stuff, and like just the knowledge, like you just can't kind of put a price on that. So like that I always think will be, you know, probably the thing that I'm, you know, the most happy with the experience is just being able to work with all these people and just learn and just be around everybody.
There's a concept in the fan culture. It's a bit of a tangent, but you'll see where I'm going. There's a concept in the fan culture of chess, right? Which is called the immortal. You might have heard of it, where the premise goes, for each great chess player, they pick one game that's called that person's immortal. And it's supposed to be the game that sort of defines, you know, their style or their strengths, whatever it might. So it could be like Kasparov or something. I'm not actually a chess fan, so I wouldn't know what it would be. But the idea is, it's a cool concept, because the idea is, what you're sort of saying is, if you were a casual fan and I came into chess and I heard like, hey, wasn't this Kasparov guy like this shit? The idea is, instead of having to read like a massive book, it's like someone could just tell me the game. I could go watch it. And I could at least try to get like what was the right. Being as you did the whole Overwatch League, is there a specific match or a final or a moment that like to you, it's either like say your best cast or it's just the one you feel the best? If someone wanted to watch a Mr X Overwatch League game now, what should they go watch?
I think the season 2 finals in Philadelphia, I think that was just like a really special moment, special match. You know, the Shock obviously were incredible at that time throughout the whole season against the Titans, who were also great. And then, you know, we had done, God, OWL was so weird at the beginning. It was like you had to win season 1. The finals was you had to win 2 best of 5 series out of 3. Like,
it was a best of 3 of best of 5s or something. Yeah, exactly. I know it sounds bad, doesn't it?
So it's like odd. Like I casted season 1 finals, but I casted series 1 of the
that's a nightmare. Okay, right. Okay.
Finals. So year 2, we just did a first to 4, which was good.
Okay.
Which that I think I would have as like number 1. I think just like, you know, I don't think stadium shows are like necessary, but also like doing a stadium show is cool. Like I would never be like, no, don't do that. Like, you know, being there with those 2 teams and that crowd, the match was a bit of a stinker, but it had some awesome moments, and you know, just the crowd and the energy and the excitement. It's also another thing that'll go down as a mystery of like, you know, Overwatch League never really got to do what it really wanted to do, which was like this like event based thing, because like COVID happened. So like who knows, right? Like, you know, we were doing pretty well with like stadium shows and other shows. Like who knows how that would have turned out? But you know, that live event was pretty awesome. I think that was cool. And then I would say the following year, pre-COVID, we did do a few homestands, and like there was a kickoff in New York, and that was pretty sweet. It was like, you know, we did a few weeks of the traveling roadshow before COVID, and you started to kind of get like a feel of like what it could be. And like the one that I did in New York was pretty crowded. Dallas, I think Sideshow went to, was pretty packed. Like, you know, I did DC after that. Like that had a good turnout, and then it all just kind of like stopped. But like, you know, I think those 2 moments for me are probably the ones that like stand out the most. I also think because they're like live events, right? I think doing like a finals online is like really bizarre. Like you're in your bedroom and you're just kind of like, I remember the first year with COVID, it was super weird. It was like, because they play the finals in Korea and it was like 3 a.m. in LA.
Right, sure.
And like, I can see Mitch on like a tablet in the room. And I was like, this just feels like really just kind of like bizarre. You know, and like try to like do like the hype and the energy, like you know, I don't think you should rely on the crowd solely for that, but it obviously is a factor. Yeah, I would say the Philly final and the New York homestand for year 3. I think those are two I look back at pretty fondly.
Right, obviously on the Overwatch League, a person you got to work with who you have yourself referenced many times in this episode, it would be on the bingo card, is obviously Puckett. So if people don't know, not only was Puckett, to me, Puckett is just MLG, mate. He's so iconic from that. But like, I always tell people, because he was a host, he actually got to do, might have done more games than anyone, mate. He came into CS, he's been in all these bloody games, mate. Every game I can think of, he's done. And I'll tell you what, even just working with him, one thing I found was, he's someone I learned a lot about professionalism from, mate. Like, he does have that amazing sheen, and he is just like, on camera, he always nails it and has the right tone, and it doesn't matter what's going on in the green belt. Like, so you've known this guy since way back before this. Who is Puckett to you?
Oh, I mean, he's kind of like the start of like, you know, my whole journey. Like, I know I wouldn't be doing this if I, you know, never met Puckett or he didn't have like faith that I could do something like this. And I think like you kind of nailed it. Like what I've learned from him is just like how to, you know, when it's so odd, like, cause you know, obviously like a host, you know, he's like asking questions, whatnot. And like a lot of people don't see like the behind the scenes stuff. And I feel like he's one of the best people to have in a green room. Like you could have, like, I feel like he's so positive all the time.
Yes.
He's great at keeping everybody else feeling like engaged in the show and that they're doing a good job and like, you know, keeping the show on track. Like, I think it's like a little bit of an underrated.
Yes,
and
he's
like,
almost got like a glue guy element in that sense. Right? I know what you mean, by the way. I actually thought at first for real, because you have to understand I'm a bit cynical. It's my style. When I'd already seen him on camera and I hadn't met him, I saw that like very American like sponsor and welcome to the Hamilton. And I thought, this guy's fake as fuck. He's going to turn out secretly. He's like a diva. So he is actually too nice. He's almost too nice. It's crazy.
And, you know, like you just kind of sit back and like you just watch how he kind of like operates and, you know, commands himself, and like it's a easy kind of thing to follow. I mean, like a lot of the new talent in, you know, Overwatch, and I think they've gone on to do some amazing things in like Valorant and other titles. I mean, you spend like 8 months in the green room with like, you know, people like Monty and Doa and like, you know, Puckett, like every day, like you're gonna turn out all right. You know what I mean? Like you get a crash course of just kind of like how to act, how to come in every day and like approach your job and your craft. And like, you know, even when I know Puckett was not having great days, it never seeped into the show.
Right.
You know, always able to go out and put on like an awesome performance. And, you know, he's one of the ones that like, you know, he could go anywhere and be awesome.
Yes.
Right.
The joke is he could be on real TV, mate. He doesn't even need to do esports, I feel like. He's so good, isn't he? Like, I think, look, I won't say anything I might have heard, but the joke is he actually should just be on the NFL. He's that good, mate. He's so good, isn't he?
Like he should just be hosting like NFL Red Zone. Like he's just like sometimes I'm like, man, why are you just messing around?
I know he's slumming it with us.
I was like you, like he has like, he looks like you could tune on like the news and he would be like the guy. Or like, hey, Ryan Seacrest is going to retire and he's going to be replaced by Chris Puckett, and you'd be like, okay, fine. Like, and you know, sometimes it's hard. This industry moves so fast that like it's tough to slow down and like, you know, we talking about Call of Duty where you appreciate like the moment and the players, and it's like, you know, nobody knows when like, you know, the last game that this person cast or that person cast, or you know what they move on, and it's like you kind of need to appreciate all like the, you know, we have so many talented people. Like I think we sometimes take, because we've all been doing it for so long, we all take it for granted that we're all still around doing it. Like somebody like Puckett should be like, you know, celebrated every award. Like I think he did lifetime achievement this year, but like, you know, he's somebody like, you know, they should name like a host of the year award like after or something like that, right? Or you look at stuff like that for the future, because like, you know, the one thing that I do worry about esports is like, you know, we keep going down, you know, this road, and I think it's going to get bigger, right? And I think we all do, and we all believe that. But like, we somehow forget about all the things that kind of happened. Like, you know, that big moment will happen, and you know, everything will be fine with esports, and we'll all be, you know, sustainable and normal, whatnot. And like, we'll just kind of forget about like, you know, all the people who kind of like helped guide through these types of times, right? Where, you know, I think Chris Puckett's somebody that you can look at and like, you know, in the worst of times, the best of times, always put on great shows, performances, whatnot. Like, you know, even I see somebody like Adam on Twitter, like Apicella, like, you know, how many people wouldn't be here?
Oh, absolutely.
If Adam didn't.
The only reason I ever got to do like MLGs and all the CEVO and shit, which was the Counter Strike, then is because of this guy. Yeah, like, the joke of esports is it really is like knowing the right 10 people, basically, right? It's not knowing like all. You have to get, if you get to the right OGs, they're the ones that put you in the position, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at like, you know, the people like Adam and Sipso and Sonny, Ryan, Pete at MLG, and like all those, and like they're working there, like all the event staff that would just like set up, like are pretty much still like at EE and still doing it, right? Like, you know, they're like, all of these kind of people are like a little bit unsung heroes on the back line, so to speak. And I think people know about a ton, right? But you know, it's really easy to get burnt out on this industry and be like, you know what? Third time I'm doing esports, like F it, I'm gonna go do something else, right? But a lot of these people, whether it be, you know, whether it's like, you know, ESL OGs, EE OGs, like MLG guys, like good or bad, they keep trying to push through and, you know, have stuff for all these players and fans. And I think like, you know, one day we'll step back and we'll be like, man, those people really saved all of us for a while, huh?
Yes. By the way, I do actually have some questions about some other games, because since you've done so many FPS, some of these are obvious ones to ask. So I did notice, to be fair, people have to remember, I'll take you back in time a second for the context.
Yeah.
When the beta of fucking VALORANT came out, was literally right when the whole world went online and we were all stuck in our house. So to be fair, everyone in Counter-Strike played it as well. Everyone did as like a fun game basically on the side. It was the main thing everyone was playing, right? I noticed you did play it in the early VALORANT scene, and so people might think your background is also like, was there ever a time, have you ever thought about branching into VALORANT? It feels like it would be natural for you, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game that I play a ton, like I think is awesome. I played it early. I didn't really kind of like, I think it's you always like have like a line where it's like, okay, no, I'm like a face of the Overwatch League and broadcast, like, you know, talent contracts exclusive, and like, you know, obviously you can do whatever you want outside of it, right? But I feel a little bit like disingenuous. It would be like kind of like, hey, you know, Valve's going to pay me to do CS all year. I'm going to go on the show, tell them how awesome CS is, and then I'm going to go home and stream like 500 hours of Valorant. I kind of feel a little bit weird about. So
you play for the other side in a way, right? I see.
Yeah, okay. Right. Where like I love the game. I think it's awesome. You know, it would be, I think like kind of it's a, you know, a natural type of game, right? Attack shooter. I think when you look at games now and it's like, okay, what's the next evolution of like, you know, shooters? I think they've pushed it in a direction, right? Where you know, I love CS, and then sometimes I get on CS and then I'll play Valorant and I'm like, man, CS feels so old. Like even CS2, I'm like, man, it just feels like it's missing like a new twist, where like CS, it's so difficult, you can't really mess with that old formula. Where Valorant, it feels like they've kind of, I mean, look, they've done a great job in supporting it too, right? You know, the VCT is doing great things, having the 120 tick servers for just everybody just playing, right? I mean, that's not cheap, right?
No.
You know, you have to be pretty serious if you're going to support that, and it seems like they support it everywhere. Where, I mean, I think that would be a super, you know, fun game to get involved with. Like, I even think, like, you know, we joked earlier, I think like the Siege community is really, you know, strong. Sure. Like, I think that's, you know, there's a lot of different things going on right now. I also think this is a moment for sports and gaming that like there's going to be people just trying loads of stuff, right? I mean, I don't think you're just going to see the same like 5 games just kind of keep going down the same course. Like, you know, somebody with every game being basically like a live service at this point, like, and what you're splitting your player base with like 5 other games, right? Like, it's difficult, I think, for a new game to kind of break through unless they're made by one of those top, X companies. But I think somebody's going to try something super interesting with their game as a live service, and somebody's going to like hit on it and it'll pop off. Like, I saw Apex Legends is adding like talent trees for all the characters now, like in games. So now you're getting like, MMO style talents in a battle royale. And like, I think you're going to see people just experiment. And I think Valorant, right? Like, I think they go down the path of, keep adding new characters, keep adding new maps. They added a new gun recently. And I think like the advantage that they kind of have over CS in that regard is like, you're to enter, a new weapon into Counter-Strike. I mean, remember the revolver? Like,
it'd be the end of the world. Yeah,
it would be like, it'd be like the world was falling apart, or like you're like, hey, we're gonna introduce some kind of like new dome smoke or something like that, right? Like people would go crazy. Where like Valorant kind of has like a playing field where like anything they introduce is kind of okay. They have no precedent, so I think they can experiment a little bit more. Where I'm also interested, like CS2, like how that evolves. Like,
I have a CS related question. So let me segue.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, this will be a little bit of juice for people who don't know. This might actually shock people, but when I worked on Flashpoint and I was the creative director, what's cool is, in theory, me and Monty shared power, but because it's my game, Counter-Strike, and he's some pleb from League, I just told him, mate, I decide who works on this thing. But you could say you did as well. Like, I'm hiring the people I want. So what people won't know is, in the first season, we just did kind of like Overwatch League. We just hired all the people from CS we liked, GDK and Maniac and Semler and Anders, all these people we liked, right? But because when we went online, then it separated, like certain people couldn't do the broadcast anymore. And at the time, actually, no one knew what would happen with all the other games like Overwatch and different games. So at the time, you know this, because obviously we had these convos. I actually was talking to both you and Uber, who obviously aren't from CS. I mean, he is sort of a long time ago. And I actually thought that was my idea to innovate CS. I thought, why don't we just get the best talent who are really great in the other FPS and bring them over? We know they got the skills. So even though it didn't happen, obviously I was there only there for a year, to be fair. The project didn't keep going. It doesn't exist now, and you stayed Overwatch. It didn't happen, but there was a world where, depending on what happens, like we would have. I think that could have been really cool. I think you could be great in Counter-Strike, mate. Have you ever thought of doing CS2?
Yeah, I mean, dude, I've known a lot of the CS talent for a while, like at events and whatnot. I did some Call of Duty with like Machine.
Sure, back in the day, sure, yeah. Whenever
I'm at stuff, like I always try and like meet up with that crowd. Where like, yeah, I think that would be like super fun, and I think also like, I don't think I think some people get like a little bit daunting going into a new game, but like going into CS, I'm not gonna like be like, okay, I'm the smartest. You know what I mean? Like, okay, this, like, don't expect like steel level analysis, right? Like, and I think that's like okay. Like, it's just like, hey, here's a new fan base coming to our game. They're learning it, right? You're introducing them, and like, over time, like, yeah, you build up that credibility with that like fan base that you can do something like that. Where like, CS, the one thing I've always looked at is like that the talent on CS is so good. like the broadcast like is so entertaining. Like, I mean, it's kind of like when we were doing Call of Duty. Like, it was the only game that like me, Puckett, Maven, like we all watched and we're like, oh my god, like we want to be like these. Like, we want to be like these guys. Like, that's kind of like, for shooting games, that is like, the pinnacle, right? Looking at some of those broadcasters and everything they did, where like, yeah, I mean, I think there's no way Valve just kind of like lets CS just exist how it is, right? They're just gonna constantly improve it. And the one thing that we've seen is like, CS has lasted. I mean, how many games have kind of got in and out and in and out, and like League of Legends and CS really, and even like Call of Duty's lasted like 10 plus years now, right? And like, I think Overwatch and Valorant will get there like in time, right? Have that like decade long run, but like those two have been proven through everything going on, right? 1.6 to Source to Go to like, it just keeps going, right? Where I don't think there's many other games that have that type of longevity.
By the way, if people don't know, you did briefly do a comeback to Call of Duty. You did CDL. Yeah. Was there ever a world where that was like a pivot to just be a Call of Duty guy again?
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought about like Call of Duty again, but I also think there's something exciting about new challenges. Like, I think, going back to Call of Duty is like, hey, that's like probably the easiest thing to do. Where I kind of like things that are a little bit scary. Of like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna go try out CS. I'm gonna go do Valorant. Like, because it's a challenge of like, okay, I know what I'm good at. Let me see what this fan base likes, and let me adjust what I do to that. Where doing, I think when you kind of get in the rhythm of doing the same thing all the time, you just kind of lose a little bit of like the creativity sometimes. Where I could jump on the Call of Duty broadcast tomorrow and probably do an awesome job, right? But am I learning new things? Am I growing? Am I doing different stuff? Like, I think, and it's not to say I wouldn't do it, but I think having some other things mixed in that like give me different opportunities, work with different people. Like, I'd love to see what Riot does in their production, what it's like in their meetings, and like how CS does it, and like just taking things from different places that maybe I've learned and taking it there, or vice versa. I think that's super interesting to me.
Right, we've only got a few minutes left, so what I'll do is I'll combine the last question with the outro, which goes like this. I normally just say, like, do you have a message and someone to thank and say hello? But in your case, I imagine people who've watched the interview also in the message would like to know, what are your current future plans? Like, is it to be in Overwatch still? Have you got other games? Where are you at? So, and as I say, is there anyone who will thank and say hello to as well?
Oh, I mean, just, thank all the fans. And then also I would say thanks to all the people, obviously like a weird time, like all the people who've like reached out. I've tried to like kind of like reach back out to everybody else, and just kind of how we talked about earlier, where everybody kind of like is so segmented. Sometimes when you're at home doing an online show, you don't live near a lot of the other talent or people in the industry. It's like, man, like, do I still have these like friends and have these like connections, right? Where it's like, maybe to like not get laid off to like get those kind of like conversations going. But like, I think it's probably just also on like, I like to stay pretty kind of like to the side and do my own thing. So it's actually probably more on me to like actually kind of keep in touch with people. But just big thanks for everybody. I'd love to still do Overwatch. Like, I actually think there's probably as much positivity around Overwatch esports now as like there was ages ago. We talked about how awesome it was with like, the open events. I think that game has a huge player base, and if it's open and captures some of that player base, I think it still could be really awesome. And then also, hey, like if there's, opportunities to do other games, I think me and Mitch are capable of doing, many other games. So I think, maybe explore that. Maybe, I really enjoyed my full-time work behind the scenes, so maybe explore something like that. Maybe, I think there's a stigma around, just kind of like talent. There's a talent like, well, why would you want to go do something like, off camera or whatnot? It's like, well, those like that's pretty satisfying too. Like there shouldn't be anything wrong with like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna, take the experiences that I've learned and do something else that impacts the scene. So for me, I'm just kind of open to everything. I'm just kind of, trying to take things as they come, and we'll figure it out. I mean, we've existed in esports this long, right? Something good will happen. And no, I mean, this is awesome to get to chat. Me and my wife always talk about that one esports awards where we were all at the same table. And like,
yes,
that was the one that we went to, and like I don't think we've been to one since, but we were like, should we go again? I'm like, I don't know if it'll be as good as that time.
Yeah, people have to realize if you're at a table with like me, Richard, and people drinking alcohol, listen, that convo alone is worth going to the awards for. Sure, yes.
Yeah, no, that was an awesome time. But yeah, hopefully we all get together again soon. I think hopefully with more open events and things like DreamHack, right, and other things like. Hopefully we get all esports people back in the same room and on the same page again.
Events come and go, fame rises and then falls away. You have a job, you lose a job. You do one thing, you have to move on to another. But one of the cool things about my career is I have my own support network who's always got my back. So I always know I can rely on support to do the work I want to do and talk the way I want to talk, and not have to follow certain rules that others arbitrarily have to follow. And that support group is, of course, called the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community. This video and all the others on my channel was kindly supported by Matt Pugnaccio Racula, Frisky, Ahmed Haju, Tobias Bernasconi, Toucan, Tosh, Jensen Gore, Animosity, and you know it, always my main man Jerky's minion, rocking with me, ride or die. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for a future episode of Reflections or a talk show? Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming guests are? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my video AMA where I tend to go quite in depth, or perhaps you want to take part in one of those really long donated discussions where we talk about whatever you're into in esports. Well, if any of those perks or any of the others catch your fancy, join the Skilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box where? Down below.